Good afternoon. So I'm glad I'm not the one who has to wake you up after lunch, because I think that was a fantastic presentation just now. So my name is Lola Oyelayo. I am currently Director of Strategy and User Experience, but taking my kind of lead from Deborah earlier on, job titles don't mean much, so don't pay too much attention to that. I work at HEAD. We are a digital products and services agency based in just off Tottenham Court Road. What that basically means is that we make things that can be considered digital products or services. So that can be apps, but that can also be enterprise software, that can be big data systems, that can be cloud software, it can be everything. And we're multi-disciplinary as an organisation, so my background is in user experience, research, design, consultancy, but we have developers, we have project managers, we have user interface designers and so forth. So we're a company that likes to mash different skills and people up together and see what interesting things you get out the back of it. And it's because of that we have been dabbling a lot in the Internet of Things and wearables projects. And over my 4 years at HEAD, it has become very apparent that it's going to be very, very difficult for a lot of people to actually make stuff in this new IoT world order. So I'll start by sharing a quote I made up, which is that every time a client says we need to get into IoT, Kevin Ashton strangles a kitten. Kevin Ashton is the guy who coined the term, and he's actually a fellow MIT, and he's also working a lot in all the kind of the infrastructure and the standards that run the IoT world. But the reason I say that is because everyone thinks it's really cool and they're really interested and they absolutely love to talk about it and they want to be in it, but the realities seem to wear people down quite quickly. So I'll go back into a little bit about our credibility. So we have a part of our business called HEAD Labs. HEAD Labs is our official play pit. There are 2 full-time members of staff that work in there, but the entire company indulges itself in HEAD Labs. At the moment, or in the past, that has been things like we've built our own smartwatch apps. We've made everything you possibly could think to make with Arduino. We try and get to the point where we say we evaluate 100 plus technologies a year, but we don't keep count, so technically that's true. We have worked around, we've done some stuff with 3D printing, we have an Oculus Rift and other augmented and virtual reality software, toys that we play with. And we've built our own open innovation platform that we use internally for like challenges and games. Over the years, some of our work has been fun. So we had a Vote-O-Matic, which was just a voting machine where we could vote for the best presentations at our regular presentations night. So you would stick a little ball in the mouths of one of the 3 people presenting, and there was a real-time counter that was kind of popping up on the TV screen, which was quite fun. Last year we also had a connected pumpkin called the Hack-O-Lantern for Halloween, which sat next to our receptionist, and every time you tweeted it, it screamed at her, so it was kind of called the Scare Rizzy Project. One of our cool projects at the moment is we've got this thing called Office Vibe. So we moved into a new office and we wanted to experiment with just tracking how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So we built a box and walk past it, tap it as many times as you like, and there's actually a place you can go online, see how we're feeling today, against yesterday, against last week or last month, etc. So HR is actually trying to build some kind of policy around this, but it was again just a bit of an experiment for us to see what we could do. Sometimes we collaborate with external people when we do this. So again, we invent projects for fun. Sometimes people come to us and say, hey, I have a problem. We're like, let's make that a project. So a good example on the top left is originally a Connect stroke rehabilitation project, but it also became a Leap Motion project where people who have had a stroke sometimes suffer from a condition called left side aphasia. So they don't recognize the left side of their world at all, and so they go to rehab and they have physios working with them. So we built an at-home rehabilitation game that you could play using the Kinect, but then we upgraded it to Leap Motion. It was basically just training you a little bit every day to pay attention to the left side of your world a little bit more, so that you essentially did the same thing you would do with physio. And we quite like doing the healthcare stuff, so again, kind of like Deborah, we're kind of twins at the moment. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament earlier this summer, and I was put in that thing for about 6 weeks, which everyone kind of joked and called it Robo-Lola, but it didn't do anything robotic. It was purely mechanical. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if it actually did something quite smart? So we have jacked it up. We've got sensors. We've started working with a new type of microprocessor called a particle photon, which actually connects to Wi-Fi. The guys have been playing with a lot of mechano and doing all sorts. And the idea is, you know, I went through quite intensive physiotherapy, but I only saw my physio twice a week. And in between, I had to gauge for myself whether I was walking better or doing the right things or putting enough weight or not too much weight on my own leg. And I'm going to have reconstructive surgery on the ligament. So with the brace, I will be the first victim, should I say, to try and rehabilitate myself with a bit more data. So it will tell me how I'm moving my legs. So the idea is that you actually start to move your leg better and you have better angles on it, and also how much I'm walking, because they put you in the brace as opposed to a kind of a full leg cast these days, because actually getting walking as quickly as possible is the most important thing. So this is all just to kind of speak to our credibility in a way. We've eaten our own dog food, we've torn things apart and put them back together so that we understand it. As a user experience person, a lot of the Internet of Things world interests me, because it's not about interfaces, it is about connected environments, and you're almost designing without screens. So it's made us all a little bit more aware and educated about what it takes to actually do this stuff. And unfortunately, given the many conversations I've had with a lot of our clients, and given the many interactions we've had with people who are interested in our projects, the reality is most people are nowhere near being able to launch anything in this space. You know, we make our own stuff, we hack our own cloud services, and we launch it because we can, but an organization that wants to do something really cool in healthcare, or you know, somebody who wants to do something really cool in gaming even, they're nowhere near ready to do this stuff. And there are three big patterns that I think it's important to share. So the logistics are always way more expensive than anybody's considered. So we can buy a 69p microprocessor or a £25 Raspberry Pi. If you're shipping 1 million products a year and you need 2 or 3 of those per product, that cost starts to become quite significant, and nobody's ever thought about that before they want to try this thing out. Microservices as a technological architecture, I don't know how many people are familiar with that phrase if I say microservices. So not too many. So essentially the way that we built software, say even as recently as 10 years ago, was you needed a website that did A, so I'm going to give you a website that does A, and everything about A is in the website. But then mobile phones and smartphones came along and you needed an app. But because everything you needed to do was in A, you have to duplicate A again in an app. What microservices do is they actually extract the behavior you need from the place where you do that behavior. So you have a central architecture of all of the functionality that you need to take place, and lots of little bits of code that allow you to send and receive information from a website or an app or a television or a fridge or whatever. So you have to actually unpick your business logic from your website and turn it into something that stands alone and doesn't care about what specific technology it's been sent to. And that's a really, really big deal for most people, because they just haven't even realized that they're running their business off a content management system as opposed to actually really, really central tech. And the final one is that you really can't have a content management system with that. So a lot of the people who come to talk to us are from marketing departments. Great ideas, they're working with agencies who want to do things like connected spoons, and you know, they're kind of all there with all the thinking, but they see Internet of Things as a publishing exercise. It's can we get more social media? And the problem is, if there's no interface, and if this product still has to be a spoon, you can't send it messages, and so you can't connect it to your social media management system and your content management system so that the same person who's monitoring that is monitoring your spoon. It's just a completely different world. And so I'll take you through 3 discrete client examples or project examples that didn't happen. I have anonymized them somewhat, just to talk you through the detail of these 3 issues a little bit more. So the first scenario, a large home appliances manufacturer that we have worked with for a long time was presented with the opportunity through me to maybe try and get a music service in the fridge. I basically had friends in both places. We thought it would be quite cool. Most of us, I certainly myself, take my iPhone into the kitchen and I plug it into a speaker set and listen to music while I'm cooking. It's like, well, wouldn't that be interesting to see if that could be embedded in your... actually, the original idea was that it'd be embedded in the extractor fan because it's so loud that it drowns out the music, and it's like, can you compensate for that? So the idea was not, let's build something straight away. The idea was, let's get a bunch of your fridge people with me and some of my team together with this music service who are really interested in actually being part of a hardware system as opposed to just an online service. It never happened. And the reason it didn't happen is because when I had the conversations with the physical product teams, they were like, it takes us 18 months to get a thing to a place where you can put technology in it. You know, they play very well with plastic molding and experimentation, but they really don't have the same kind of rapid experimentation cycles that we have in tech, where we just want to spend a couple of days pulling things apart and putting them back together again. And they couldn't quite fit the way we wanted to work into their workflow. Again, we couldn't go anywhere to just get budget for one day without having priced components. And once we priced components and there was a whole organizational workflow in place, somebody realized that this might cost them an extra, €1 million a year in production. Now that's fine as a cost, and obviously that was a really big deal, but we had no way of saying, yes, but you might make X more in revenue. So you can't really counter the cost argument because you're still trying to experiment, hence you don't experiment. And finally, actually, in this case, you have a music provider. They have a lot of work to do. They've got a really powerful platform and tons of engineers grinding it out. You've got a hardware manufacturer or a physical appliance manufacturer who only get that. And then you've got us who are kind of like, let's do something cool, but we don't sell you software or we don't give you any cloud subscription. Nobody knew who would own the experience. And again, when you're having conversations where people need to pay for time or they need to actually allocate resources, they're expected to provide certainty to the accounting team, and all of these things were very, very uncertain. So this project just didn't happen. And that's a pattern I've seen repeated about 4 times now. The second one is actually even more random in lots of ways. So that's a beacon for anyone who's never seen one. Some people refer to them as iBeacons. That's the iOS specific one, but you can just buy a beacon. And it's very small, it hides anywhere, and it can do interesting things such as push messages into your smartphone or track what's happening in an environment if you've got Bluetooth on. Now, a particular company that sells out-of-home marketing, so any billboards you see on trains or big posters on the motorway or digital interfaces at train stations, they were offered the opportunity to put these into a transport system that they deal with in terms of advertising. Now, transport's quite interesting because you're sat in one place for a long time, so as a captive audience, if someone's just trying to hit a number of people, they can hit a lot of people and they're not going anywhere very quickly. So it's interesting. Let's get some beacons in there, let's do something quite cool. But the people who buy that space don't know anything about apps. They know a lot about marketing and attention and PR. The company that has the out-of-home company, they know a lot about the logistics of placement of ads, but they don't know anything about beacons and technology. So the idea was that we work with the teams that build apps and build digital strategies. Can we help them connect to the right people to have the discussion and see what happens next? And we've been at it for about 4 months, and we still haven't got anything. So the company that's providing the beacons have beacons all over the place, and you wouldn't know because nobody's buying any advertising space to send you any messages. They don't quite know how to make that happen. And they don't come with any ready-made propositions or services or things that are interesting to you guys with which to do that compelling selling. The out-of-home company really don't know how to get into the whole digital strategy business, and they don't have the language themselves to push on that. The clients, the people who have the apps, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Tesco, the Just Eat, they're like, yeah, this could be quite interesting actually, but why don't you work it out and then come and tell us about it? Because we don't want to do that. We've got other problems and other priorities. So nobody is interested at the moment in doing the work. You've got a really great almost there thing, and then it's kind of like, well, whoever gets there first, so if someone's interested in playing with this, it would be quite interesting, gets the glory. But the question is, who's it going to be? The worst case scenario is somebody literally figures out a way to push shed loads of really crappy adverts onto your smartphone, in which case we will all switch off our Bluetooth forever and ever, and the wearables market will die because nobody's going to want to switch their Bluetooth on to use their smartwatch because they just get shit ads all the time. So that's going to be quite a difficult one to crack, but we're still talking about it. We'll see how we can make it work. The final scenario is not crock pot. This was just an example because they put Wi-Fi on their pot, and I thought that was quite interesting. I don't know what for, but there's Wi-Fi on the pot. So there's another small appliances manufacturer, great brand, lots of really interesting products. You probably don't think about how often you use these guys every day, but you use them every day, everywhere you go, and they're constantly innovating on the value of that particular product that they make. They haven't got anything like the Crock-Pot guys, but they feel like they're late because these guys have amazing adverts and apps and products that look really smart and digitally smart. So they're like, okay, we need to get into the connected world. We need to get into the smart kitchen. We need to be part of this movement. But we've got a really good brand, so we have to do it in a way that retains our value and makes us cool without experimenting. The problem is, there is no best practice. So I keep dwelling on, I don't know why they've got Wi-Fi on this pot. It would be quite interesting if I could buy it, but it's an American brand. But I genuinely want to understand how that adds to the experience of cooking with a slow cooker, because you probably still have some problems leaving things going too quickly while you're not at home. And I know a slow cooker is one of those things that's getting us used to leaving things cooking while we're at work all day, but do I want to look at it every 2 minutes? I don't know. Anyway, they also, because they don't have the skills themselves, they would like to buy something that's ready-made. And I guarantee you that Apple don't buy anybody else's technology ready-made, and Google don't buy anybody else's technology ready-made, because they recognize they have to build it and own it and control it. So they're quite scared to start building something 5 years late and need to take 2 to 5 years to get there when there are other competitors, but you really can't buy this stuff. It just isn't that easy. Again, just because it's got Wi-Fi doesn't mean you send it articles and recipes, and I think once you start trying to figure out what is your proposition when something doesn't have an interface, it falls apart very quickly. But then they have governance standards. If anyone's, I think you talked about that earlier on as well, but you know, every time we buy a piece of technology, just to make sure we can manage it, it must talk to our CMS. It must connect to our social media. It must be plugged into our Microsoft SharePoint intranet. That doesn't work. It doesn't work, and you completely stifle innovation, and actually you just get a hybrid monster. I think our director of technology considers that approach like buying a speedboat and then putting wheels on it and trying to get more seats and a seat belt so you can drive it like a car. If you just want a car, buy a car. Don't buy a speedboat and try and make it a car. So trying to buy connected services and an IoT infrastructure and make it talk to your CMS is doing the same thing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's the wrong way to go about it. And the bottom line is that, you know, these guys may never ever do this. They may end up really desperate and get quite reactionary and actually just buy something quite awful and have a really terrible experiment and then have a really horrible time with PR because it all went wrong. But the realities for them are quite real, and I don't want to sound unsympathetic. I think if you start to unpick what it means to actually change the way you think about what your product does, which is what you need to do when you connect it to the internet, it can be very difficult for a business that's 100 years old to just throw it all out the window and start again. It's actually a lot easier for a startup to do that and start again. But there is hope. So we're talking to these people, we're helping them, we're educating them, I'm trying to give them a way through. But each and every one of us that works in a corporate or a manufacturing organization or a business that's experimenting with this stuff, we can actually help. And I think the main point I wanted to make is we can broaden our perspectives about what it takes to interact with the end user. So whether you consider yourself the communications specialist, the developer, the UX designer, the UI designer, or none of the above, you're the person who makes sure that the components are priced correctly, we're all actually part of the solution. If we all start understanding what it takes for the other part of the business to be able to get a little bit of this technology in, then we can start changing the game from the inside out. And we talked a lot, or it's been talked a lot about today, about hybrid designers or hybrid people and how much value they are. Hybrid people are amazing. They're also unicorns and they're rare. But hybrid teams are not, and hybrid environments are not. And most of us work in a hybrid environment. So it is actually just about connecting with somebody in another team and having a conversation and seeing how that goes. So there are 5 core skills that I think are really important with experimenting with Internet of Things, 5 capabilities that we have found in our years. Don't read all these words. But technology. So you do need somebody who understands the tech. The tech is constantly changing. There's new stuff out there. You need somebody who's professionally plugged into what technology means. I talked about microservices architecture. It's the reason why 1/3 of Amazon's revenue does not come from selling books or Amazon Prime. It has made them supremely rich, but you wouldn't know that if you're not into the tech world, and it's transforming the way things are built. Materials and engineering, again, very, very undersold. I actually originally, my degree, I did electronic engineering, and I nearly failed because my wiring is crap. But actually getting somebody who can wire things up is really, really powerful. And I think the fact that we can play with Arduino kits and pull things like Raspberry Pi and the new one, the particle photon, these are really easy to buy and starting to practice, because you do have to get some electronics into stuff to start getting them talking to the internet. Service design, anybody here recognize the phrase service design? Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a really difficult place to express the value. And I think we talk about a lot of digital services in a very flippant way, and I think we can sometimes be undermining of people who have crazy ideas, but explain Twitter to your grandmother 20 years ago. She might even get it now, but 20 years ago, it's not easy to conceptualize this stuff if you haven't seen it in action. And what you need is a service designer who actually is practiced in designing the way people and things and technology and systems evolve over time to help you frame that journey. Just as much as you need somebody who's crazy and looks to the future and says, in 2 years' time, objects will be floating and we'll all be able to interact with them in real time. And you're like, this guy's nuts. That guy might be inventing your reality. And actually, it's really useful to have someone like that, because as soon as you hear yourself going, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible, that person says something and then you're like, oh, maybe it's possible actually, because that's just made me think of something else. So that's quite important. And finally, a hacker, somebody who's not afraid to pull objects like this apart. I remember we did actually pull one of these apart to get at the infrared thingy that pokes at the clicker. Somebody who can pull things apart, figure out how they work, and then put them back together again. These are teams, not necessarily individuals, but it helps if you can find a couple of hybrid individuals to make it work. And to me, you cannot do without these 2 specifically. You need somebody who's a physical engineer, and you absolutely need somebody who's a hacker by design. Once you have those two, any one of us can pick up the rest. We can join some blogs, we can start doing some reading, we can work stuff out. But if you get somebody who can work with physical components and somebody who's a little bit mad and happy to pull things apart and reverse engineer them, then you've got like a really powerful team that's kind of ready to go. And I'll leave you, I'm aware I'm trying to minimize the overrun a little bit, with a quote that I always love. So I am, as I said, I'm an engineer by training. I'm kind of really interested in the evolution of startups and the fact that lots of engineers and designers are starting businesses. And one of my idols is a professional crazy, Elon Musk, who a lot of people say that the Iron Man is sort of based on, or Robert Downey Jr.'s version of the Iron Man is based on Elon and his weirdness. But he says the path to the CEO's office should not be through the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and it should not be through the marketing department. It needs to be through engineering and design. And the reason I like this quote is because if we, as experienced designers, developers, if we start understanding how the money gets made, if we understand how that can be connected to the projects we want to work on, we start disrupting large businesses in the way that accountants want to run them and start running them in a much more innovative fashion, and we run them with a view to the future and not necessarily towards the past. So I would encourage us all to kind of think a little bit differently. Read up on Elon if you haven't. He basically changed the way space rockets got built by being, not by redesigning them himself, but just by being crazy enough to suggest you could do it for $1 million instead of 50 million. And he did it. And so it's that kind of thinking that I think we need a lot more of, and that's what's going to help us get a little bit more disruptive to at least start doing a few more Internet of Things projects. So I hope I haven't bored you. But I'm on Twitter, and yeah, thank you very much.